Hello guys, and welcome back to this devlog of mine. A few months back I started recreating an old RTS Flash game I used to play quite a lot during the good old Flash game days. I never actually got to finish that recreation, as the scope of an RTS was still a bit too big for me at that time. I did however record all of the progress making that prototype game, which is quite a lot actually. And as it's also quite a lot of storage space that's just wasted by lying around, I thought, why not still upload the process? It might be entertaining and might even help some of you who has faced similar issues with the project. And who knows, I might even continue development of the game if some people seem to enjoy it. So with all of that out of the way, let's start with the first episode of this, I guess, X-devlog? So first of all, let me explain the RTS that I used to play so much. Normally I would show you all some footage of that game, however, I just have forgotten the name of it and my Flash game provider actually got shut down a few years even before Flash died. So sadly all that remains of the game is my memory, which will cause some complications down the line, but let's get to that when the time comes. So for starters, the game was a single player 2D RTS, with you playing against a bot on one simple map. You would fight over pump jacks, with which in some way you would get other points or something like that, with which you could then build up your base, with walls, turrets, and of course produce tanks and stuff. And with the goal being then to just destroy the opponent's main base. As you might have noticed, I don't actually remember how you would get the oil. What I mean is, like, do you have a total amount of oil points which would go up over time, with more oil being like produced, with more pump tracks getting captured, or like something else? I don't really remember. So for this project, I just opted for that rising points idea. By the way, if anyone thinks he knows the game, please write the name of it in the comments. I already searched quite a lot, however sadly never found it. So going into actually making that game, one core aspect of the old Flash game is the static 2D map, which I don't really like, to be honest. I thought it would be far cooler if the map would be randomly generated, so I started creating a system for that. And after only a couple of minutes I got a basic world generator working. It worked by just setting a grid of boxes next to each other and then changing the height of each box based on the Perlin noise sample. Perlin noise, for those who don't know, is basically a texture with black and white dots on it. We can use these dots to represent height. For example, black could be a height of 1 meter, grey a height of 0.5 meters, and white a height of 0 meters. For anyone looking into terrain generation, I highly recommend looking at Sebastian Lague's or Brackeys videos tutorial on that. They're actually quite awesome and go in more depth about Perlin noise. Now then, going back to the video, I then also added some stuff like a height curve, which is a graph I could then change depending on what kind of terrain I wanted to create. A linear curve meaning a more linear, like flow of terrain, and a more flowy curve, meaning that some areas will be a more, well, flowy. And while the terrain already looked quite good, I also encountered a little problem that was caused due to my way of generating a terrain. Now, normally what you would do when generating a world is that you would basically lay down a huge blanket of terrain, which you would then increase the height of at some points, resulting in mountains at those exact points. The method is extremely good in terms of performance, as you only have one side you need to render, the top, as well as only a minimum number of corners or vertices in dev language that you would also need to render. All in all, it's a very good way of creating terrain. I however wanted to create my own method to generate a world, making a more voxel-like terrain, and I was just too lazy to again look at creating this blanket of terrain from code. Again, Sebastian Lague and Brackeys, awesome videos. Now then, my big brain method was more like actually putting Lego bricks next to each other and then combining all of them at the end to a total Lego build. All a bit more experienced devs are going to cry now in the corner. And all of this to a non-dev might look quite big brain at the first glance, until you realize that every brick has 6 sides as well as 8 corners, and that every side, even though you don't see it when going over the map, gets rendered by Unity. Now, because of a lot of these corners in the total build cause quite a lot of lag after a specific amount, Unity has a built-in max amount of these corners per total build or per map, which I reached quite easily with my very good terrain system. So you might ask yourself, what did I do to fix the problem? Did I A, completely rewrite the system to a better and more efficient way? Or did I B, just ignore the warning and go around it? So I just created 3 different objects on which I then would split the bricks on, meaning that it would not actually change anything in performance-wise, but could outplay Unity's warning. So with no red error messages in the debug log and everything looking okay, I moved on to try to make the game not look like shit, i.e. looking at adding colors. Here I at first tried looking at the shader, which I then quickly got away from as shaders are still a bit of ahead in terms of understanding. Now with shaders out of the way, I then just took the simple and easy route of creating 3 different block types, which I then would place depending on the height. And that resulted in a quite good looking map if I do say so myself. I might change the block models later on, but yeah, I don't know. Still, it's a prototype, so who cares. Now then the next step was actually setting up the base for this map. And as my map would be generated on runtime, I also needed to generate the base locations on runtime. Now, for all of you out there who don't know what runtime means, let me explain. At its most basic level, a game can be running in 2 states. Runtime, i.e. just running, and non-runtime, not running. And I think those are the 2, I don't know. I'm not a good game dev. So in terms of map generation, CSGO maps are always the same, and are therefore already there when you first start the game. Its maps were made in non-runtime, i.e. before you start the game. Minecraft on the other hand generates its map while you run around in the world. It creates its maps in runtime, i.e. just while it runs. And similar to Minecraft, my game will also create its world while running. Now the base position is therefore also far harder to set than it might seem like at first glance, as I can't just say put it there. I have to check that the player can walk from that point to the other base without having a mountain in its way. If so, that would make some quite questionable gameplay. Now for this checking of available paths, I wanted to use Unity's built-in navmesh pathfinding system. It's a system that can do exactly that, find paths on surfaces between 2 points. And as I had already used it in some of my projects, I was fairly confident that I shouldn't be too hard. I was wrong. Now the problem here was not actually the generation of the path, that was quite easy. It was the generation of the surface for the path. Now let me explain. Navmesh needs 3 things to correctly pathfind: a surface, point A, and point B. In our example, a surface would be the map, point A would be, well, our base, and point B would be the enemy's base. Again, the surface here was the problem. You might think to yourself, but wait, there's a map there, right? I can see it. Well, you're actually wrong.
Wrong.
It turns out, or at least when I was researching it, that, well, you couldn't generate this map at runtime, but had to click a button before runtime, which is wrong, but that's just what I knew at that time. Okay, and again, this map I'm talking about is not actually the map you can see, but a map that navmesh puts basically on top of my map to know where to go. So in desperation, I just opted for the easiest way, make my map before runtime. So I threw on Unity's train system and made a pretty cool map in about 3 to 4 hours. Clicked the generate mesh button, and what the hell is that? For some reason the map had these weird holes in the mesh, which meant that the AI would not be able to walk on that position. It was especially weird that they were not like constant, so while on one time there would be a hole on one side, it would not be there the next time, making it extremely difficult for me to find the actual problem for that. So as nothing seemed to work, I just ordered myself a pizza and watched some Spore gameplays on YouTube when it hit me, Brackeys. The god of gods, he must have an answer to this, and indeed he had. It turns out that I was missing an extra package that the navmesh system requires to work on runtime, and with that I was finally able to go at it again. Thanks, Brackeys. And after all of that, I finally had a world that would generate reliably and set 2 base locations in a way that made sense. And all of this took only about, how much? 12 hours.